Hi, I'm Jenn Hind, student minister here at Trillium United Church. As I'm sure you know, life has no shortage of adversities, challenges, and changes. Over the last little while, I've had opportunity to reflect on a few of these of my own. The death of my father being one. Another would be my commitment and maintenance of living a clean and sober lifestyle. And another, leaving my profession after 16 years to answer my call to ministry and to essentially start from scratch. These, I guess, are what I would call the game changers. As I'm sure you can relate to some game changers in your own life. As we approach the Easter season, we find Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is one of the prominent images that we find as we approach the Easter season. Jesus reveals his human struggles, and this image is just sort of ingrained into our imagination as we start to contemplate Easter and what that means in our lives. So when I was reflecting on this image and what it means and what Jesus is doing in this time, I think we could also say that this moment, this time in the garden, is a game changer for Jesus as well, as he contemplates what he needs to do, what he feels his mission is that God has called him to do, and so he needs to meet the challenges that are laid out before him. So it makes me kind of think about, well, I can remember a time when I was going through my own game-changing situations in life, and I thought to myself, I have no idea how I'm going to get through this. I have no idea how I'm going to find the strength or the resources to be able to manage this situation. And I think perhaps Jesus was experiencing that same moment as well when he was, 3 times Jesus went to the disciples and moved away. And each time he came back to the disciples and he would find them asleep, and then he would go back into that image of prayer, that presence of God. And so when I was looking at this, the actions of Jesus, and looking at this moment and trying to understand what was happening here, I get the sense, I get the image that Jesus is going to the disciples to maybe derive some sort of human companionship, some strength from his friends and his partners and the people who have been immediately surround him and have been journeying with him. And the disciples are asleep, and they've sort of succumbed to their own human resources and their human frailty, and they've fallen asleep. And so Jesus finds himself a little bit alone. And I can remember times when I was going through my struggles that I would often look for the people who are around me to support me. And for whatever reason, they were busy with their own lives or they weren't available. And I too had to find for myself a source of strength that I could rely on. So again, looking at the story, we see Jesus move in and out of this sequence 3 times towards his disciples and back into the presence of God. So what is it about this that's giving Jesus the ability to do what he needs to do? Well, I think perhaps it is just that. It's the intentional movement into the presence of God. It's one thing to have faith, be a Christian, have a spiritual practice, but it's another thing to intentionally step into the presence of God and evoke and declare that presence. And so I think this is what Jesus is doing, right? Jesus is moving into a position that he can experience God. And that is through intentional prayer. It is through an intentional act that is sending messages not only to himself, but to the people around him, that this is about God. This is not about my own human agency. This is not about my own strength, my own resources. This is about evoking something that is beyond myself, that is stronger than myself. Because I think even what Jesus knew in the garden, because the scripture tells us that Jesus became grieved and he became agitated and he experienced these human emotions, that there was a humanness. So Jesus knew he couldn't rely on just his human capacity to accomplish the tasks he needed to do. He needed to rely on something stronger, and that was God. So 3 times he moved into the presence of God and evoked and commanded the presence of God within the situation that he was dealing with. And I think that that's the lesson that we can learn too. I think that that's something that strengthens us just through the act of doing it, because in that we're sending the message to ourselves that I don't have to do this alone. That there is something bigger than my own self. There's a surrender that comes from doing this act with intentionality and focus. When I call out to God and I say, I need your help in this, I need your strength, I need your power, I need you to be in this with me. We're sending the message to ourselves that we know this and that we can surrender to something that's greater than ourselves, and we can evoke that power. And I think that's, a little bit of what Jesus is doing in the garden. And I think that has a great deal to do with how Jesus was able to accomplish the things that he was able to accomplish, and most specifically, what gave him the ability to accomplish what he accomplished on the cross. So when these game changers come up for me in life today, the first thing I need to do is I need to go to God, and I need to surrender, and I need to remember that it is not upon my own human agency that I am left to deal with whatever comes up in life. It's not upon my own resources, because upon our human resources there will be weakness. But with God, anything can be accomplished, because it's about relying on the strength of God, not upon ourselves. And I think that's what Jesus is doing in the garden. Amen.